Hey there, witches, and welcome to my video all about past lives. I realized that I have a podcast episode about past lives, but I don't have a YouTube video for it, and I think it's such a cool topic, and I know it's a topic that everybody's really interested in, so I thought I would pop over, make a quick video. I want to ask that you do me a favor and go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a like if you're enjoying my video content, because it really does matter in the grand scheme of things for me, and the more subscriptions I have, the more I'm able to make videos for you guys as I transition over into full-time kind of social media content creation. So that said, let's get that out of the way. Also, you can find me on my podcast over on Spotify or on iTunes. Apple picked me up last year. So if you search for Moonstone Witchery, you'll find me there too. Okay. Past lives is such a cool topic because I think it's something that we all have this innate, really like desire for and like a willingness to know about and like a yearning to understand, because there's this innate sense that we have that it's like, I know that this can't just be it. Like there's just like this inner knowing, and sometimes we feel like we just know things or we have things flowing through us and we don't really understand the origin of those things. Like, how would I have ever known that, or why do I feel so drawn to this one place or time period? And you guys are all right when you're asking yourself these questions, when you're like, I've always had a fascination with like ancient Greece, or I've always had this yearning towards understanding more about like the Victorian era. Typically those signs and signals, that's what I call them, within ourselves are our past lives recall, like kind of manifesting within the self. And the interesting thing is that just like we have like tangible physical DNA in our body, I believe we come into our lives with like a cellular soul kind of level DNA that is brought in with our past lives, or with our incarnation this time, with our spirit, with our soul. And the soul carries some of these memories forward, and they might even manifest as like physical marks on your body. Like a lot of people who have done readings with me around past lives, my dog is here. A lot of people who have done readings with me on past lives, I will reference, like this just happened the other day where I was talking about an injury that someone sustained in a previous life, and the person who I was talking to said, well, that makes sense because, when I was born, there was all this, like it was a knee injury on a certain leg, and they were like, well, when I was born, there was all this cartilage that was growing the wrong way on my knee. And so is it possible, she said, like that was from that life? And I was like, absolutely, because this is how these things kind of manifest. This is that soul level DNA that I'm talking about and how it brings itself into our current life. But it's also frequently about our fears. Our fears are often, especially if they have no resonance in this current life, our fears are often kind of throwbacks of situations that have happened in the past. So if you have a really intrinsically intense kind of fear of heights or fear of abandonment that isn't traceable back to your current life, often there might be a past life link or a past life connection. One thing that I like to do is tell people about all the ways that your past lives are already manifesting themselves in your current incarnation. So we've already reviewed some of them. One of them is things that you're interested in. If you're interested in specific historical time periods, if you're interested in specific geographic regions, if you're really feeling called towards certain kinds of experiences, or you feel like you're actually really not called to certain kinds of experiences because they feel traumatic or they feel familiar in a certain kind of way, that's another manifestation of a past life. Somebody that I had done a past life reading for a couple months ago, this was my first time talking to them, and I was saying to them, I don't really see children in your cards for this lifetime, because in the past life reading, as I was doing the reading, this person had a ton of children, like in the double digits number of children. And the physical toll that had taken on their body in that previous life was so immense, not to mention the emotional toll, because in the time frame in which she had her previous life, she had a lot of loss around her children, because honestly, not all children made it to adulthood back in the day. It was a much more common thing that children wouldn't make it to adulthood rather than that they would. And while it was a more common experience, that didn't make the trauma or the pain of it any more common or any more easy to digest. It just happened more often. So the amount of people walking around in the world with immense trauma in our past recent history is so high that a lot of times that's why some of these past life experiences are seared into the soul, and they manifest themselves as fears or hesitancies or insecurities or just like bad feelings in our current incarnation. And this person that I had been talking to, when I had said, you had all these children and it was really hard for you, I don't really know that children are a part of what's in your soul path for this current incarnation for you. She had said, that makes so much sense. I've always been terrified of pregnancy. I've always been afraid to deeply attach to children. And I have no interest in having children in this life. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Because ultimately the universe is really about harmony and balance. But let's look at the age of the universe, because the universe is so long, comparatively speaking, to our experience of time, that when we're looking at balance in terms of the universe, it's on a larger scale. And that balance can span lifetimes, because if your soul is doing one thing really heavy in one lifetime, it's not necessarily going to need to do that thing really heavy in another lifetime because of the law of balance, or because of the state of balance that the universe is trying to maintain itself at. And this balance is happening across the board. It's on all kinds of different levels, but that's probably a different topic for a different day. So when it comes to past lives, the funny thing is that either in a previous life we were like really heavy into something, and that interest carries over and carries forth into this current life because maybe we felt unfulfilled in some capacity, or maybe we weren't complete with what we were working on in that lifetime. And in other times it manifests in this current life as being like, nope, I'm good, I'm done, right? And we can't predict which way it's going to go. It's just a matter of like where the soul arrived to in that situation. So, okay, we're going to look at what are the places that I feel drawn to, and let yourself indulge with this. Like, when I was young, I was like really into like the Civil War for some reason. I was like very interested in studying about it, reading about it, learning about the hospitals that were set up in the field, learning about what it was like for the people who were living while the soldiers were off fighting. And I recognize now that that's because I had a past life in that time frame, and it was such a period of high trauma for that version of me, that the current version of me, who is looking at the situation from a place of relative safety, is able to study it and to kind of comprehend it and make sense of what that version of me had been through and how it all kind of played out. It's almost like we get to, like, spoiler alert ourselves, like look at the end result and kind of feed ourselves that information from that previous life, which is pretty cool if you think about it like that. So if you have something like this that you're interested in, I would suggest that you really engage with it, really allow yourself to connect with it, because there's something magical that happens when we allow ourselves to connect with the artifacts and the information from a previous life. It awakens even more of that past life recall for us. It brings it more to the surface. There's a familiarity to it. And one thing that I've noticed is that we get more information. Like when we lean into our interests, we get more psychic, spiritual information downloaded about the thing that we're leaning into, because we're not restricting our access. We're not shooting on ourselves, right? We're not like dismantling our natural inclination and making ourselves wrong. This is where our inner skepticism can become problematic. And I always say that, considering I'm like a psychic intuitive and like a professional witch, it's a weird thing for me to have skepticism about myself, but I am actually one of the most skeptical people when it comes to spiritual things that you will meet or encounter, because I know that there's so much false information. There's so many people kind of like not quite getting it. And I don't like to say that there's so many people out there intentionally scamming others or intentionally leading them astray, although my Instagram is being like scammed and replicated on a regular basis. So I think my guides are trying to get me to kind of reprogram and realize that like there are people out there with like negative intentions, obviously. But I like to kind of just be like, oh, I'm sure we're all positive and whatever, let's just keep it moving because it's an easier way to live, honestly. But my point is, there's a lot of people out there that are not kind of in alignment, not maybe sharing positive information, whether it's intentional or not. And so I'm very super skeptical about all of these spiritual things. And so I encourage skepticism in my clients. I encourage skepticism in you. But the reason that I don't want us to be skeptical with ourselves is because we can gatekeep information from ourselves through the veil of our own skepticism. We can gaslight, dismantle, and disempower our own selves because of our own innate skepticism. And I always say, like, the world is skeptical enough. We face enough skepticism. We face enough disempowerment. We are given enough opportunities to not believe in ourselves in this life that I want us to radically power through and claim all opportunities to be on our own side, to believe ourselves, to accept our own worth, to listen to our inner voice, and to be like, what if that's true? Like, what if I'm not wrong? What if I am remembering a past life? What if this interest that I have is greater than just the series of experiences that have happened to me here in this life? And what if I explore it? So I want you to give yourself permission to lean in. I want you to give yourself permission to have curiosity, because that's what's going to compel you forward. And the rewards are there, because once you start digging in, you'll start to have more recall. You'll start to have these things manifest back up in your conscious awareness for you. And I think that's really important, but also it's super validating for you. I remember that I've had several lives in ancient Greece, and I went to a museum where they were, and I didn't realize they were even doing this, but where they were having like an exhibit of like ancient Greek artwork. And this was a very specific kind of artwork, and it doesn't matter what it was, but I get into this room and I'm suddenly surrounded by these images, and I actually started to like just cry. And I'm not really like a crier to that degree, but all of a sudden just crying. And I was looking at these images that were so familiar to me on a soul level that it was very, very validating. It was very, very helpful. It allowed me to connect to that version of myself. And as I'm standing in that room, I'm seeing image after image after image go before my eyes. And I'm like, yes, that's right. I remember this, right? And so it's important to allow yourself that same opportunity to lean into yourself, to set yourself up for success. I want you to be the person that always believes yourself. Because we have so many people that we feel like it's an uphill battle with. We feel like we have to justify. We feel like we have to like present our case. We feel like we have to like have all the answers before we can share anything about ourselves. And that's like a really kind of toxic way of living in the world. But our cultural dynamics are super toxic to begin with. But what I'm trying to have us do is to stop being toxic with ourselves, to stop having toxicity towards our inner knowing and our inner guidance. And one of the ways you can do that is just by asking yourself these questions like, what am I drawn to? What time periods? What locations? Like whatever else. So that's the first and second kind of things that you can look for to try to determine what's already happening in your world about your past lives. Sorry, it's like allergy season for me. The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to think about, like, have you ever met a person and instantly you've, like, known them? Like, just like, oh, there you are. And this is kind of like, it's funny because it's both a rare and not rare occurrence. And what we do with that realization kind of depends on, like, a lot of things, like our attachment styles and how we've been raised and all of those things. But when we have those moments, typically there's almost always a past life link. Now, this can take a life of its own if it's in a romantic context, because we might take this as a signal to like really lean into a relationship that perhaps we don't need to really lean into, because perhaps that relationship already played itself out on the stage of a previous life. So we got to do some self-check-ins there. Like, is this a current thing or just a familiar thing from a past life incarnation? But either way, when you see someone and you have that moment, it's like, I know you. And one thing you can say to yourself is like, where do I know them from? And I'll tell you this, you're always going to get an answer. See, the funny thing is with spiritual things and with witchy things and all of this stuff, I always say, like, be careful with your spell work, not because it's not going to work, but because it is. And be careful with like asking your questions, because not because you're not going to get answers, but because you are. And the reason I say that is because, number one, most of us are receiving so much more information from our guides and our channel than we realize. We just don't know how to empower ourselves. We just don't know how to believe ourselves. Because a lot of times if you stop and you say, oh my God, that person, I know them, but you didn't meet them in this lifetime, you can say like, how did I know them? Like, what do I know them from? And then you will get an answer. That's the fun part. Like, you will get an answer. And when you get that answer, I want you to practice trusting it. I want you to practice being on your own side, and I want you to practice like just knowing what you know and then saying, what if that's true? Because really, like at this stage of things, there's really no way to fact check yourself. And I say at this stage of things because I really believe that like one day when science and spirituality decide to go ahead and merge, we're going to have so much more information and we're going to know how to maybe fact check these things. But right now, we don't. And so you can't really be wrong. I mean, you can't really be right, but you also can't be wrong. But we're so used to making ourselves wrong about everything that we don't consider allowing ourselves to be right. So ask that question to yourself. Ask yourself, like, how do I know them? And just let your answer be true and let it come through and let yourself just know what you know, or at least let yourself just know that you know, right? I definitely know that I know this person from a previous life. Now, if you engage with that relationship or that friendship or whatever it is for too long, and it turns out it's kind of toxic, that might be your sign that you were not supposed to engage with this person anymore in this lifetime. Like that might be your sign that, oh, this was a complete thing over there and we don't need to keep going right now with this thing here. Just food for thought. That's more coaching kind of related than past life related. Another way that past lives are going to make themselves present in your current reality is through your daydreams. And no one really thinks about this, but my guides told me this a long time ago, and it's so real. You know how when you're doing like a guided meditation or something, they're kind of like put yourself in like a safe and sacred space so you can like talk to your guides or like do whatever. Yes, do that. Pay attention to your safe and sacred space, because if it's not somewhere that you know from this current lifetime, it's possible, albeit not maybe probable, that it's somewhere that you know from a previous lifetime. A lot of my safe and sacred spaces that I go to, I finally had this awareness, and I guess it was like 10 or 15 years ago at this point, but whatever. I finally had this awareness. I was like, oh my God, that's my like secret hidden place that I used to keep all my stuff. Like I merged my past life memories with my safe and sacred space, and I realized, oh, they're the same. This is a real place that I used to visit. This is a real place that used to belong to me, and it was safe and sacred, so of course it shows up now. And if you drift off in your daydream states to certain locations or certain places, then that's another indication of like a past life memory. That's another way that it shows up for you. Because going into our safe and sacred spaces is, in our daydream reality, is often like, where is that imagery coming from? Like, what is that imagery about? And it's often about like a past life memory. Like I can vividly see a specific temple. And because I've done a lot of past life work with myself, I know that temple. I know where it is. I know what residence it had to me. But when I was young and I would like imagine visiting that place, or when I was young and I would imagine like being in that space, or I would just randomly see it and recollect it, I would be like, oh, right, like this is that place. I wonder where it is. I thought I was making it up. I thought I was just vividly imagining it. But now, at this stage of things, I'm very aware that that's not the case, that that's not what was happening, that it's actually a memory making itself more present for me. And so it's important for us to really have awareness around the fact that, like, perhaps these daydreams, perhaps these visualizations, perhaps these visions that we see aren't just random. What if they're not just random? What if they actually are real? What if they actually are true? What if it's actually a place of presence from you from a previous incarnation? What if this is a real thing? What if you already have access to so much more information than you realize? And along with that daydream space, the place that you drift off to, there's another kind of place that we can get information about past lives, and that's our dream state, right? If you have repetitive or recurring dreams, or repetitive or recurring visualizations, or repetitive or recurring imagery that's anywhere in your subconscious space, I want you to engage with it. I want you to lean into it. And I want you to say to yourself, like, does this feel real? Do I feel connected to it? Does it feel like there's parts of me that are left there? Does it feel like there's parts of me that are alive there in maybe a different space and time? Does it feel like I can access that space in kind of like a human kind of way? Maybe not in this version of my humanity, but in a previous version of my humanity. Because that's definitely a part of how it shows up for us. And when we ask those questions, we can almost kind of like dip into that space really quick. Now, there is some fear sometimes for people around calling forth their past life information because perhaps they don't want to remember it in a way, oh, it's okay. Perhaps they don't want to remember it in a way that will re-traumatize them. Come here. Come here, baby. She's not listening to me. Perhaps they don't want to remember it in a way that will like re-traumatize them or bring up something that is hard for them to remember or to recollect. Perhaps they don't want to remember something that is upsetting or challenging or difficult for them. And I get that. So you can safeguard yourself by saying to your guides like, hey, please only make these dream spaces, or like, please only make these memories that or this information that I receive, or whatever your criteria might be, please only make it safe for me to know it. Please only make it like subliminal or okay. Don't tell me things that are going to dismantle me. Don't tell me things that are going to harm me. Only share with me information that is empowering and uplifting and okay for me to know. And your guide's job is to protect you in this life. So your guides will do that. They will listen to that. They will make sure that they don't overwhelm you. They will make sure that they don't traumatize you in any kind of way. You can say, I only want information that's for my highest good and my ultimate healing. And in that capacity, you can start to lean into trust of what you receive rather than having fear be the barrier through which we're trying to get all this information, because fear is one of the most powerful barriers that there is. And we don't want to set up more barriers. There's already enough. We already have enough hindrance towards our trusting of ourselves and towards connecting to our previous versions of ourselves, that we don't want to add more by having fear be an additional layer on top of additional layers, right? So ask your guides to just simply bless you with this information as long as it is safe for you to know it, and then you can really trust it and you can really lean into it a little bit more, right? A last thing, and this is kind of more advanced, but as you work with yourself, as you work with your connection to spirit, as you work with your connections to source, you can go ahead and sit in one of those safe and sacred spaces in a meditative space. And you can invite in your guides, even if you don't know what that means. And you can then just trust whatever you see. And you can say, show me one of my past lives. Show me what it is that I experienced. Show me who I was. Or tell me about it. And your job is merely to trust and believe the information that you receive. Because when I do past life readings for people, what's happening for me is I'm tapping into their guides and I'm saying, show me their past life. And if they have a certain criteria about themselves, whether they want to know if they had a life with a certain person, or if they had a life in a certain situation or a certain geographic location or whatever the case may be, they might say, like, show me this place or show me this time. And I'll say, okay, bring me a life that matches their criteria. And what their guides do is they play the life for me. I just channel the whole thing. And it's almost like a movie. And my job is to tell them the movie that I'm seeing, and to tell them who the characters are, and to describe for them what the themes are. And we kind of go through it all we speed through it all in a little brief kind of synopsis. But the core things that are always being brought up in these readings, they always pertain to the themes that are playing out on the stage of this person's lived life right now. And what I always want people to know is that, like, you can do this for yourself too. It's not that I'm doing anything so super special. It's that I'm really trusting what your guides are showing me. And I'm just capable of narrating it back to you. So you can sit in your own safe and sacred space with yourself, and you can do this work for yourself. You can say, show me a life about whatever, and trust what you receive. Write it down. Ask yourself to, ask a scribe angel to sit on your shoulder and to record the information for you so you can just freshly write it down when you're done. But one thing that's important is I want you to write down the feelings that come along with the visualizations, because the feelings are really part of what's anchoring us back to that place and time. The feelings are what have the most resonance. They allow us to kind of tap back in, and they allow us to kind of understand it on a deeper level. The feelings are really important there. So pay attention to those as well. And the last thing that you can do, and everybody can do this, and this is a cool thing to do, sit in a meditation or like just with your eyes closed. Not everybody's good at meditating, and that sentence alone can really put people off from meditating, and I don't want you to be put off. I just want you to just be like, I'm just going to do this as my version of a meditation, right? Sit in that state with yourself. And then, it's okay, baby. Come here. It's okay. Sit in that state with yourself. And I'm going to share with you a pretty profound and kind of like intensely like, oh my God, thought. If we have all had many lives here before, that means that your very bones, your own remains, are scattered throughout this planet somewhere. Like your remains are here somewhere with your current incarnation. Multitudes of them. There's a lot of them. And what I always like to do is sit in that meditative state, and I call back my own energy to myself from my own remains, from those previous incarnations. Is this not kind of like trippy though? And I say, I want to receive my own energy, only the healed energy, only the positive energy, only that which is for my highest good and ultimate healing, right? I want to recall all my own energy and call it back to myself from my previous lives. And you almost turn yourself into like a magnet or like a vacuum for your own energy, and you suck it back into yourself. And watch as you receive wisdom from yourself. And watch as you receive an inner knowing. And watch as you can suddenly like do things you couldn't do, or be aware of things you weren't aware of. And watch as you level up in a lot of different ways in your life just from that one simple act. Because what you're doing is you're acknowledging that your very bones exist here, and they're carrying and holding some of your previous essence. And you're going to call back the helpful portions of that. And in this way, you are your own ancestor. And in this way, you honor yourself because you lived these whole entire lives, and you struggled and you worked and you tried really hard and you did your best, and you had moments of joy and moments of heartbreak, and you had a whole vivid reality. And it's kind of lovely to honor that in a way. So spend some time doing that. And that's one of the best ways that you can access this whole past life realm for yourself. Because once you call back that energy, you're now in this like multi-dimensional state with yourself, where not only are you the current version of you, but you've incorporated all the multitudes of other versions of yourself. And you've incorporated them into your tangible body. So it's not just on your cellular level that you're operating here, on your soul cellular level, excuse me, but it's not just on that soul level that you're operating here with all the layers of it. Now you're operating here with all the layers of it on your soul level, but also all the layers of it in your physical, tangible level too, which is really cool. And it makes you even more of a conduit. It makes you even more connected divinely. It makes you even more like in that spiritual essence. And I think that's really important. And I think that that's really powerful. And I know that it like really up levels us. So these are just a few ideas. It's just a little bit of a conversation about past lives. If you have questions for me, leave them in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to book a past life reading with me, you can head on over to my website at moonstonewitchery.com. But please remember, you can do this for yourself as well. And please do me a big favor and go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I hope you all have a beautiful and blessed day.